That's how I would define my job on a very abstract level. Yeah, it's basically zooming out and considering future possibilities. Yeah. Whatever the task may be.
Herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge des Podcasts Jobnavigation, Menschen und ihre Berufe. Ich bin Anni Nürnberg und auch in dieser Folge stelle ich dir wieder einen neuen Beruf vor, damit du besser beurteilen kannst, ob dieser Job etwas für dich wäre. Dazu interviewe ich einen wunderbaren Menschen, der in diesem Beruf arbeitet und dich vielleicht auch darüber hinaus noch mit seinem Lebensweg oder seinem Charakter inspirieren kann. Architektur ist für viele ein Traumberuf, weil es ein sehr kreativer Beruf ist, weil er deutlich sichtbare, langlebige Bauwerke erschafft, die vielen Menschen Nutzen stiften. Heute spreche ich mit einer ganz besonderen Architektin über ihren Beruf und Lebensweg. Wir sprechen über die beiden Studiengänge, die sie gemacht hat und die sich für sie wunderbar ergänzen: Architektur und Integrated Design. Ich frage sie darüber aus, wie erfolgreich sie die innovativen Konzepte aus ihrem zweiten Studium in die Architektur bringen konnte. Und sie erzählt uns von ihrer neuen Freelancer-Karriere, wo sie Architekturbüros kreativ und weitsichtig unterstützt. Das und noch viel mehr erfährst du in dieser Folge von Alex. Ich interviewe sie auf Englisch, weil sie auf Englisch flüssiger und freier sprechen kann als auf Deutsch. Viel Spaß beim Zuhören. Ich werde auf meiner Webseite auch ein deutschsprachiges Transkript des Interviews veröffentlichen. Also falls du dem englischen Interview nicht gut folgen kannst, kannst du es dort auch auf Deutsch nachlesen. Hi everyone, this podcast episode is recorded in English because my guest Alex is more fluent in English than in German, and as she does most of the talking in this episode, we decided to do it in English. Even though my English is not as fluent as hers, but I like to challenge myself, so here we go.
It's perfect. No worries at all.
Thank you. My guest Alex is an architect. She has 2 master degrees, worked in different architectural offices, and now has her own business as innovation strategist and architect. Welcome, Alex. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you very much. Happy to be with you.
So at first, I'd like to know, why did you decide to study architecture? What interested you in this field?
Yeah, that was really difficult for me, actually, because I was interested in so many things after high school. I knew I wanted to do something that was kind of had a bit of complexity to it, whether that was medicine or computer science. But at the end of the day, I really enjoyed drawing, and the arts always attracted me. So I thought architecture might be a good mix of both something that's technical and artistic. But honestly, it was kind of a roll of the dice. It was very hard for me to choose, as I'm sure it is for many people who are curious by nature.
Yeah. Okay. But do you now believe it was the right thing for you to study, or could it have been something different as well?
I think it was the right thing. I'm happy with my choice now, although I did struggle with it in different moments of my life. I think after my bachelor degrees, I really questioned whether it was the right thing, mainly because I think I hadn't yet found my own way of going through and going with projects and like embracing the creative process on my own, which I would say is the biggest thing you learn in architecture studies, or it's the most important thing you can learn. What to do if someone gives you a blank piece of paper. And that means that you have to really grow a bit of trust in yourself and your intuition and your experience. And that takes time. But at the end of the day, it's so valuable because I think it also allows you to branch out into different fields if you feel that you don't necessarily just want to stick to architecture. And I know many of my colleagues have done exactly that. So a lot of them have gone into like design, whether it's graphic design or UX UI design. Some of them have become consultants if they're curious about people and about organizations. And yeah, it's, I think, really multifaceted. So in that sense, I think architecture is a great choice, but I also don't necessarily believe in the wrong choice. I think that once you go through uni, which is difficult regardless of what you choose, you have hopefully then a strong skill set that and faith in yourself that enables you to try and build your own path. But it's never easy. So yeah, no, I'm happy with the choice, thinking about it now. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And how was studying architecture for you?
Yeah, the first 3 years were super hard, like terrible, terrifying. Well, not only because it's very demanding architecture, but there's also this culture of like this idea that you have to give everything, including most of your free time, to the studies in order to produce something really worthwhile. So from that aspect, I'm not sure I agree. I think there's a little bit of a toxic culture because it's also good to stay healthy and sleep and have a normal social life. But yeah, I think it's good to go through this triage or this kind of push of being put into the cold water and needing to figure things out for yourself because, especially in the creative fields, there's very rarely a right answer. It's not like math. And this is one of the things I struggle with because I was more of like a STEM person in high school. I was excelling in math and physics and science and things like that. And then all of a sudden, in the creative fields in uni architecture, there's no right way to do anything. You just have to try and see what happens. And different people have their own opinion. But then if you have two professors and they have different opinions, what are you going to do, right? So the core, I think the point is to develop your own sense of aesthetic and design and what works so that you can ultimately critique yourself and actually create something that you're proud of and that you know will stand the test of time and will work. And so, yeah, it was hard to gain that. I think that's the hardest thing, really, to gain that self-awareness and self-confidence in your work as a creative. Yeah.
Okay. You didn't study in Germany, but in Serbia, in Belgrade, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it's different studying there than here?
Well, actually, my first master, which was in architecture, I did in Belgrade. And then my second master, which was in strategic design, I did it in Cologne in Germany. And they were very different studies, like super different programs. Could also be because they were in different countries. Obviously, they were in different languages. It was mainly in English, the one I did in Germany. But they were also structured very differently. So my architecture program was quite traditional, a lot of emphasis on like knowing all the different, let's say, technical aspects you need to be able to build a building, from like structure and like load-bearing systems and so forth to the facade, all the detailing. But ultimately, you did have to produce your own project always on your own. So it still was very creative, but with an emphasis on like a traditional way of knowing things, and learning. Whereas in Germany, my studies were very experimental, which is why I chose them, actually. It was a completely open program, a bit like a PhD, except you don't get a PhD. You get a master's. But you're very much kind of left on your own, but coached through the whole process by many different professors who each have very unique specialties. Like one was gender design, a professor was specialized in that. There was another one that was specialized in business and design, for example, and strategy. And so you kind of asked whoever you needed to get your project done or your final thesis done, and did small projects in groups along the way, irrespective of the thesis. That was really great. I am looking back at that time. I appreciate that also so much. I'm glad I had such distinctly different experiences, because one taught me how to think in a very methodological and clear-cut rational way, and also how to infuse my designs with and ideas with like functionality, things that make sense and make sure that it actually can work. Whereas I put on a totally different hat and learned a different mindset in Cologne, which was all about like iteration, exploration, co-creative design, pushing boundaries of like what you also think could be a good solution. Because there it wasn't just about architecture. Often like it was just a topic or theme that you were given, and then you explored the possible design solutions to like coffee, like what could you do with coffee? Or I think one topic we had, a lot of them are food-based actually, was like a project was to redesign or reinvent the traditional food of Cologne, which is like, first of all, you have to kind of think about what that even is. And we did a lot of interviews and tried to find out on the street with people, like things like that. And once we concluded that it was the Blutwurst, which was not everybody's favorite meal, but was very like a traditional, unique thing of Cologne. And we liked the idea of playing with that. Then we created like tortilla chips. We used this food lab we had, and we created tortilla chips with beer sauce that was kind of like a really fast food that everybody could pick up and easily digest. So like interpreting something that's traditional into something new was like a very unique approach and totally different from what I had done, obviously, in my architecture studies. So yeah, I had two very different masters and two very different experiences, both really useful though.
Yeah, sounds like fun.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. It's fantastic.
So what can you do with coffee? I'm interested.
A lot of things, actually. This the coffee one actually was not part of my university project. It was something I did when I was in my first job at IXDS, the small digital strategy agency, actually. And there were a lot of people from my old uni there because it was exactly the type of place that attracted, like curious, open-minded creatives that didn't like to be put in one box, kind of. And so we got from viele the brief to explore coffee. And we, again, did a lot of user research, talked to many coffee experts, went to coffee shops, tried coffee out ourselves. And from like creating different, I would say they were basically ways to actually distill and get different flavors of coffee. We tried to create different apparatuses. That was one of the approaches to actually creating subscription services where you would get regularly different types of coffee, and based on like a unique taste wheel that we also developed, you could kind of grow your own opinion about what you like as a coffee taster, as someone who slowly becomes more knowledgeable in the coffee sphere. Things like that. Like we explored. I think at the end, the subscription service was the one that they liked the most, and that they ended up developing inside the company. So that was fun. And I think these examples give you an idea of potentially of like what could strategists and innovation strategists do, both very food-centric examples. But right now, I do more innovation for architecture studios because I try to combine those two, let's say my two passions or the two aspects of my background, and I try to help architecture offices either create new services or tell stories better or digitize. All these things are possible depending on what they need in order to grow and get better. Yeah.
We will come back to that. I have more questions about your life before that.
Sure, no problem.
So this second master degree in Cologne, was it architecture based, or was it just innovation and kind of free?
It was not architecture based.
Okay.
We did have one professor who was specialized in architecture, but I kind of stayed away from that because I felt like I had done it already. So it was more strategy, innovation, a lot more also like digital thinking and digital tools exploration because it is a hot topic now, and it is, when you think of innovation, you do also often think of, what new technologies enable the innovations that we're doing. Yeah. So that it was very different, and it's I would say in the materials that I used in order to be creative, but still leaned a lot on I would say mindset and in general skills that I had gained in my architecture studies. So I was very grateful to have already done that. Otherwise, maybe I would have felt a bit lost in such an open and completely exploratory program, which I think a lot of my colleagues did at that time. My thesis ended up actually also being like not about architecture, but about space. I explored how basically you can storytell in space, or what good spaces that have narrative characteristics look like. And just to give you a quick example so that you can imagine that, like IKEA, because there's always like a path, there's a beginning and an end, and you're led through the experience in a very, I would say, like curated way. But museums in general are also very narrative spaces, so spaces that are also kind of trying to tell your story and convince you of something while you're going through them. So I was really curious about like communication and strategic thinking or wider picture thinking, and seeing how I could relate that to space, not necessarily like buildings, but just space in general, like that we inhabit, and the interiors that we experience.
Okay. And when you studied in Cologne, did you want to leave architecture, or was it always the plan to combine both of these areas?
It was very open for me. I wasn't sure.
Okay.
I knew I didn't want to do something completely different, like go into medicine or something like that. But I wasn't sure to what extent I wanted to do traditional architecture, because I enjoyed it, but I didn't feel like it was the end game for me. I didn't want. My plan was never, after my studies in Belgrade, to go into a studio and to just stay there for the rest of my life, or to, let's say, at some point open my own. But I didn't exactly know what then the path was, and this is why I chose something that was so experimental. And that did give me a lot of courage to kind of be like, it's okay that you don't know, and you can try stuff out, and it's super fun to try stuff out. I mean, that's something that I value, at least, enjoying what I'm doing along the way, because I think that for me, that's a signifier that I'm doing the right thing. If I'm not enjoying it, then I have to question, like, oh, am I in the right place now? So, I didn't know. And after my studies in Cologne, I did decide actually to not go into architecture, but to go into this digital strategy direction. And then I came back to architecture, funny enough. So you can, you can always go back, and you can always meander. I think it's never like, oh, now that I picked this back, that's it. I can never go back. I could never change again, which is good.
So after your studies, you went into this, how is it called?
It's called IXDS, not the most easy name. So it's a small digital agency, but they were bought actually by PwC, which is a giant like consultancy, and now they're the experience center for PwC. They no longer exist separately, but so they were doing, like I mentioned, this stuff for Miele, but also on other really big brands to help them to innovate, like to do innovative projects. But there were also some like really hands-on UX and UI tasks that I did there as well. So using visual creative skills, using my communication skills, lots of workshops, communication, and obviously a lot of teamwork and collaboration and moderation together for the client. I think that was what I learned there the most.
And why did you then go back into architecture?
Because I missed it. After some time, I felt like, okay, the digital, I felt and understood the IT world, or the digital, let's say, sphere, and how it functioned. And I thought, super cool. I like that it's so, experimental, in the sense that you can easily try things out. And if it doesn't work, I mean, code is easy to fix, right? Or rather, maybe not easy, but it's much quicker to change than if you build a wall wrong, and then you have to demolish it and build it up again. But at some point, I realized that I somehow the foundations that I had learned back in Belgrade, I wanted to use. I wanted to explore deeper, and also see whether I could just kind of combine the two, because I could see that there were connections, and I was always wondering, like, why didn't the architecture world kind of steal some of these ideas from the tech world? Because the tech world is, yeah, it's advancing at such a huge pace, and they have all these new methods and tools and agile and ways of thinking. Like user centricity as a concept is so huge in the IT world, whereas it's almost non-existent in the architecture world, which is, fascinating, because you're building for people. The architects aren't building for themselves usually. So I thought maybe I could bring some of my new learnings back into the architecture industry. And also kind of, I'd never worked in the architecture field, so I was curious to see if that was drastically different from working in strategy and IT. And that's when I applied to HEN, which is one of the largest architecture offices in Germany, second biggest actually. They have offices in Munich as well. And I joined their early design phases team, which is also a product experimental team. Like they are informally in charge of innovation at HEN too. So I think I always chose the places that were a little bit quirky and and open to trying new things, rather than very set in their ways and like knowing exactly what you're going to do every day. So there I got to experience what it's like to work in a large architecture office. I was there for 4 years. And it was a fantastic experience. Really glad I did that. Would recommend to anyone. I did do a lot of client work and moderation collaboration there as well. So requirements collection and then concept development based on those requirements. And working very closely with design teams, also doing design myself. But like at HEN, it's very divided, like it's very departmentalized, which is often the case in large companies, regardless of the industry, actually, that because there's so many people, then you kind of stick to your area of expertise. Yeah, but so then the design was a separate department, and we collaborated often to create a final design for the project, and then it would go further down to like the planning team, and then the Bauleitung, so construction team, and in between there's other teams like the quantity surveying team that checks that all the amounts and costs are correct. It's such a huge mechanism. It's like this really giant, I would say, like a huge apparatus. There's so many moving parts that have to function together that to, in the end, create really fantastic work, I have to say. I always appreciate it. That's why I work there. Like they did the headquarters for Zalando here in Berlin. They designed most of the Autostadt in Wolfsburg. Those are probably their most famous works, but they do large hospitals. They do master plans, office buildings. They're also doing the Sanierung, or the renovation of the Gasteig in Munich now. So anyway, that was fantastic to see, completely different from what I had done before, and very much appreciated being a part of that, being a part of that team and that whole company.
And could you transfer some of the new ideas, the innovative ideas, into HEN?
I think so. I was super lucky just to have, honestly, to work with great people. My boss was very open and was keen to actually learn what I had done before and integrate that. I think one of the reasons why I got hired was because I had such a diverse experience. And because I think they are quite visionary at HEN, and they understand that the innovation is important, digitization is important. They wanted to bring in some of those skills and try things out. I do have to say it's more difficult to achieve actual results, like an outcome inside a large company, inside a traditional large architecture company, even though for an architecture company, I still think HEN is quite innovative. But it's just the branch, the industry functions differently, has different timelines. Everything goes much slower. Yeah, and there's so many let's say, chains of relations when it comes to like, you know, getting the materials ready and making sure all the details are right, and Brandschutz, like all these different things that really have to connect, that it's not as easy as just like, oh, we're going to just implement quickly this new idea, this new like sustainability plugin for our for everyone across the company, and now it works. Like it's not that easy to do, but I think it's inevitable, even in the architecture industry, that these things happen. It's just a little bit slower. So if you're patient, you see results. I was there for 4 years, so yeah, I guess I was relatively patient.
Okay. And then you wanted to transfer these ideas to more companies.
Yes.
So then you started your own business.
Yeah. Well, when I quit Hen, I wasn't, again, exactly sure what I wanted to do. But I knew I just needed to try something different. Again, I guess like itch of like, I'm not enjoying being here, mainly because I think I had reached a point where I had learned a lot, and I had implemented a lot of things that I wanted, and it was time for me to try something different. So I took a break and I played a lot of tennis for a year, and that was really good. I didn't think I was going to take such a long break, but it just, again, felt right to do, and so I did. I started applying to different places, but as I applied, I realized I didn't really get excited also about any specific place, even though the offers came in and they were good companies and good offices, but I just felt like it would put me in the same position I was at Hen, which was like in a very, I would say, comfortable, good team position. And I think I wanted also a bit more responsibility. I wanted to be able to test out some of my own ideas, on a like with more skin in the game, maybe like that, like with with more risk in some sense, where a lot of it then relied on me doing a good job. And so one office gave me the opportunity to freelance for them, and then I realized that was exactly what I wanted and needed, and started doing that for other companies as well. It's still in its early phases, let's say, my freelancing career, my company, so to speak. But I feel very good about it because, it is like the type of challenge that I think I needed in this moment. I don't think I was ready for it maybe like 2-3 years ago, but now I definitely am, with all the experience I've collected. And back to what I said about the studies, I do feel more confident about my own intuition when it comes to design. So I'm able to critique my own work better. I'm also able to handle critique better and actively ask for it. So I feel mature enough to be able to take on more responsibility and risk. So exciting time. I'm super happy to be in this role now. So I call myself architectural strategist and innovation expert, but who knows, maybe the title changes in the future as well, because it's quite a lot to say. And I also probably, I assume that the more I do it, the more also I see maybe areas that I specifically want to specialize in, or that bring the most value to offices that then I would do more of. But right now, it's I'm really doing very diverse projects and just helping out offices with whatever they potentially need, including architecture planning. Like I've also done recently a project for a design project for 18 houses, where I just did the plans and the design. So I think what's cool is when you're a freelancer, is that you have that diversity, or the opportunity for that diversity. You're not stuck in one role that you have to do every day. And if you're that type of personality that's interesting for you, it's great. It's also can be scary and, of course, stressful, because you don't know what awaits you in the next project. And when one project is over, then it's done, and you have to do acquisition. Acquisition is also super new for me as a as a concept and as a task. But since I am super motivated to try and see where it can take me, I don't mind that extra work and those new tasks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay. So then architectural offices hire you for a specific amount of time, and then you said it's very diverse what you do, but can you give some examples maybe?
Sure.
So we have a better idea?
Yeah. It's usually not a set time. It's more like project-based work.
Yeah.
As I said, one office I was doing like traditional design, house design, like of housing, residential complex. Another office hired me to help them figure out a story behind their services so that they could pitch it better, including then graphically visualizing that. But getting to that visual part was a whole long process of really trying to discover what they believe brought the most value and how they define their process and what part of the process they wanted to share with their clients, also being client-centric to understand, hey, okay, we don't maybe have to give them all the information, but what would they actually respond to best? What would they find most interesting? And then forming that into really a story structure with a clear like beginning, a climax, and then a slowly fading out to the end. So like, yeah, it was really fun to do that with them because I think it was the first time they got to think in such a manner about their tasks rather than thinking very functionally about, okay, what do we have to do next? And then how do we present this to the client? Like we did this, and this. But rather thinking, okay, how can I intrigue the client? What are like in a more emotional manner, actually, to talk about what they do. So that was a great project. Enjoyed that a lot. And then a new project is starting up now where a client is wanting to redo their intranet, so basically their knowledge base, and for them it's kind of straightforward, like, okay, we had one already, but that doesn't work very well. We just want to make some tweaks, and then maybe you can project manage that, like as a because it's also something I have done before. And I said, sure, but why don't we rethink what a knowledge base is first before we jump into like the technical requirements? Let's think about like what types of knowledge are important to have in the company. What types of knowledge do we want to collect in the future? How do we want to access that knowledge? Do we want to have it as a folder system, or do we want to consider it more as like an AI chatbot that kind of picks out what you need? Maybe you Google it, except internally. Maybe there's an internal Google search engine, things like that. So asking those types of questions, bringing in input for them to think about, and then doing the research on what are the current possibilities with the software that's available out there, but what also will it look like potentially in the next 5 years, because it grows so quickly, it develops at such a speed that I think today, if you're investing in new software, you got to think about where it's going to take you and whether it will be viable in the upcoming years. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing that I think, yeah, is super great because it brings together the innovation aspect that I mentioned before, but also because it's an architecture office, I know that the requirements are specific, and I have a good feel for this already. Like, for example, they're much more visual than many other clients would be. So for them, being able to sketch and collect images and search through images that they have is way more important than searching through text, which would be the case for other companies. Yeah.
Really interesting. Yeah, to apply a wider view sounds like it. So not just look at what the tasks are right now, but also look in the future, how they might change, and to make it more flexible.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that is actually, that's how I would define my job on a very abstract level. Yeah, it's basically zooming out and considering future possibilities. Whatever the task may be, whether it's an architectural project or a digitization project, regardless. I think I'm naturally kind of good at that, or that's how I think. And then that's what I can bring to the table or help companies with as well. Like having that big picture view and thinking about where it could take them, different scenarios depending on what, the options are.
Yeah, sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how long have you been freelancing so far?
Now it's a year, right? Yeah, so it was 2 years since I left Hen, and then I took a break for a year, and now it's it's been the first year of my freelance. So far, so good. I can't complain. It's rolling forward. But like I said, I think I need to even go further into acquisition and start thinking about how to make it very sustainable. Because up until now, it's been like word of mouth, and I've been able to get projects like fairly easily. But if I want to make sure that it's something that I do really long term, then I have to also strategically think about the bigger picture and how to move things in the future. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I'm sure you will find a way.
I will try. I mean, I'm super motivated to do it, and I think it's cool to experiment and to help. Like I'm always what I think is always a value as a freelancer is if you have the mindset of honestly wanting to help the company be better. Yeah, whatever that means. That might mean that you actually don't, I don't know, create that crazy design that you have in your head at the beginning that you really want to try. Maybe because you find out halfway through, they don't need that design. They actually need a story structure, which is something that happened in the project that I mentioned before. It's like they were talking a lot about creating this presentation. It's like, and I had it in my mind. I had to do the design of the presentation. But fundamentally, and what they didn't perceive is that if the flow of the content wasn't as it should be, then even the most beautiful graphics will not help you with your story. So we use most of the time on that and less of the time on the graphics. In the end, the graphics weren't 100% ready and done, but they're still satisfied because what they got was exactly what they needed. So that's what I mean, like being kind of, flexible, but focused on how can I bring the maximum value, or how can I help my client really get to the next level and learn something, achieve something, even if it means, not exactly doing what they say, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. As this podcast episode is also for young people trying to decide if they want to study architecture, I have a few more questions about architecture itself.
Of course, yeah.
So, in what I perceive is that what you do as a day-to-day job as an architect differs from what you learn in your studies. How do you perceive it?
I think so. And I think everyone I've spoken to that has studied it and now works in the field would agree. Because the studies are much more about your own ideas and creating your own designs. Whereas in the real world, especially as a junior architect, you don't make the decisions. And it takes a while before you get to that point, which is maybe sometimes disappointing. And also there's a lot more bureaucracy and a lot more restrictions on what you could do. Gravity exists all of a sudden in the real world.
Budgets.
Exactly. But I think it's actually a good thing that they don't enforce that in the schools. At least in the school I went to, I think different schools do it different ways. But my school was pretty relaxed because they know that's the only period where you get to try so much out and where you get to really push your own creative boundaries. It's easier to reel that back, I think, after. But knowing that you have that capability, and in some point, maybe if you are leading a studio or a design team where it really is required that you think vastly in big ways, that you can still do that. And that's as a core capacity of an architect. I think that's good. But yeah, it is very different, and it's a lot more administrative, I think, than a lot of people understand, and a lot also more communicative and cooperative. You do everything alone in the studies, and then all of a sudden, like, you can't do anything alone in an office. No one does anything alone. You're always in a team, especially since there's usually someone when you're starting out above you that will kind of tell you which parts they need done and how to do it. And so very, very different, but I also don't think it's so bad that it's different, my personal opinion.
Okay. And many people want to study architecture in order to be able to be creative. Is it really that creative to be an architect?
Yeah, I think so, because I don't define creativity solely as design. I think that's a common misconception, like that to be creative, you have to be sitting down and sketching, and you have these brilliant ideas that you quickly just draw out on the paper. That is one form of creativity, and it exists in architecture, but it's so multifaceted, the many things that you can do as an architect, which is one of the reasons I think it's great, that require different types of creativity. So quantity surveying, which someone would say, oh, that's the driest. Why would someone study architecture and then do the calculation of amounts and budgets? But actually, it requires also a lot of creative thought to find out how to do those budgets quickly, to make sure everything is in budget, to potentially suggest changes to the design in order to make sure that budgets are met. I think that it's always the case that top priority is budget. I don't think there's ever been a project where that wasn't the case. And so actually, the people that do that are very valuable, and I would say also quite creative, just in a different way. So yeah, creativity is definitely present, and you can do many different things. You just got to try it out and see what suits you.
Okay. And when it comes to job decisions or decision what one wants to study, there's always a factor: how good will I be paid? So architects have a rather high regard in society, I believe. Is the pay as good as well? What do you think?
Well, it depends. It depends on what you do. If you own your own studio, obviously you're going to get paid better. If you manage projects, you're going to get paid better. If you specialize in whichever aspect, from rendering to sustainability to Brandschutz, then you will be paid better. But as a generalist, I think a lot of architects are a bit disappointed, especially when they come out to realize how much their salary is, because it's also a lot of work to become one. And ultimately, if you want to be able to put your name on a project, you have to be in the Kammer as well. You have to be certified, but it's nowhere near the amounts that maybe other certifications we know get, like doctors and lawyers. It's quite drastic difference. It's much lower paid. I don't think people go into architecture for the pay, though. And I would say if that's the reason you're going into it, then it's probably not a good idea. Then you might want to rethink. There are other things that will make you more money and are creative too. So architecture is partially about passion. It's partially about really that you believe that it's valuable for society and that you enjoy doing it. But you also, I think it's possible to make your own way and combine different things like I did, or to specialize in different aspects, and then ultimately also have a better living, make better money. So it really is about, being flexible and finding the right solution for you specifically. So there's no general answer to that question other than you're not going to make a lot of money right away. For that, maybe you
yeah, but that's an answer as well. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else for the listeners? Anything I forgot or that you want to tell them?
No, not specifically. The only thing I would maybe highlight once more is that it's a good journey and a good path to finding your own voice, like learning to trust your experience and your intuition, while at the same time being humble and constantly collecting information and learning new things. And if you hack that, which I think that architecture studies do enable you to do, then it's fantastic, and it's such a great thing to be, and I think really also brings a lot of value to society.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was a really interesting interview.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it with you too.